Washington, Virginia. We have the agenda before us. Any questions, amendments? I think somebody moved.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Got a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Under new business, the public hearing for the budget, I thought we should move up. Let's see if I know the minutes before we start the report, so that anybody's here just for the budget, they can be excused.
Sure.
Can people hear us?
No, we have to speak very loud.
Is there
Yeah. Is anybody here just for the budget? Oh, then we can. Okay, we'll just leave it as is. Okay, I second it.
All right, now, all in favor, please by saying aye.
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 Motion is adopted. All right, minutes from the town council meeting on April 10th. I didn't see any amendments or revisions in there.
I have some
Oh, is there?
to bring up.
Okay.
And I think it was a very busy meeting.
It was that, yes.
Barbara did a great job, but there are a few things. One very minor, under the mayor's report, next to the last line, anyone wanting to donate to the bench can send me. I think there should be, can send a check, or there's something left out.
Yeah, and send
Send a
to.
gift.
Then on page 2, with the attorney's report, and this is something I just don't understand, so maybe my fault. Excuse me. The court ruled that the statute was only for emergency meetings and the zoning ordinance was under work for 5 years. I don't see the relationship between the two. Is it that the zoning ordinance was being worked on before the ordinance?
The court's opinion, if I may, Your Honor, the court's opinion was that because this zoning ordinance had been in the process for 5 years at that point, it was not in any sense an emergency action that the Board of Supervisors needed to
Okay.
take.
So,
And to be clear, we're not talking about our zoning ordinance.
so the zoning ordinance was already under review.
Right. Sorry.
The more important one might be on page, well, mine says page 4 of 3, which doesn't make sense. It must be page 3. When it's talking about the EDA,
Page 4 of 6.
mine says page 4 of 3, which doesn't make any sense at all. But I think it's page 3.
Okay.
Where the paragraph starting Mr. O'Connell.
That's page 4. Yeah.
Okay, so that should be the third one.
Yep.
Point out that the restriction of 7 or less rooms would restrict only one entity from being ineligible.
Would be eligible.
It should be eligible. And this is sort of an important thing.
Yep.
So that's
That's why we always make sure there's one either former English professor or copy reviewer on the council. Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes as amended?
Move.
Second.
second.
All in favor, by saying aye.
Aye.
So, unfortunately, tonight I have to start the meeting once again by saying a few words about another of our longtime residents in the community who we lost last week, Joe Wink, who was a contractor for the town for many, many years, unfortunately passed away. Joe took great pride in the work that he did for the town and always making Little Washington look its best, and I know we will always be grateful for that. So I just wanted to take a moment to remember him and maybe ask for a moment of silence and for his long dedication to the town. So, motion, I want to thank Drew Mitchell and John and the rest of the folks who are getting things moving for our 4th of July celebration here in town, which will be on the 1st of July over at Avon Hall. More to follow on that in the paper, but it's shaping up to be one of the largest events we've had. I regret to report that we did not get organized sufficiently early to arrange for some fireworks, but I'm hoping we can see the return of fireworks at Avon Hall, a somewhat long past tradition here in Little Washington next year. While I'm on the subject of fireworks, however, last month I did receive or two residents of the town did raise the issue of our fireworks displays with me, or fireworks displays in the town with me, and asked for their outright ban. I have reviewed the guidelines the council established back in July of 2021 after many months of debate by this council, members, everyone here except for Drew, and looked at the number of fireworks displays we've had since then, talked to a number of other residents, and to me, the guidelines appear to be effective. The town clerk has a good relationship with our fully licensed and insured contractor who does these displays. The signaling mechanism appears to work, and if it doesn't, my dog reminds me by finding me wherever I am. And, you know, I went back and looked at the numbers, and I'm sensitive to this, because I likewise having animals who are not crazy about them, and we looked at the numbers, and since 2020, there have been 12 total displays in the town, or roughly 3 a year. And to break that down even further, that's about 15 minutes of fireworks per year over that period. And I find it hard to argue that that constitutes a public nuisance. And I don't see a reason to revisit the issue at this time. However, I know that others may disagree with me, and when we have a public comment period, I'll welcome comments to the council about those displays. I think that ends it for the mayor's report. Gail?
Nothing really in detail for this month. Just one note that, as we all know, with the aging water system, last month we spent $15,000 just on 2 leaks. One on Piedmont and one over the sheriff's office. So just that one update for you, and that's it.
Mr. Kramer?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple items to report on to you tonight with regard to the Rush River Commons process. The conservation easement has now been delivered to Mr. Geyerson and myself in draft format. We are going to have a couple of comments on that, and I'm waiting to actually see the baseline documentation report, which will enable us to see what's actually on the property now, so we can know what's going to happen, what can be allowed under the conservation easement. Also, the Land Trust of Virginia adopted a resolution last month. I've asked for it, I haven't seen it yet, so I want to have that documentation before we set that for any kind of approval that may be required. At least they've asked for our input. I'm not sure that it requires a council approval, but we would probably bring it to your attention as an informational item once staff is comfortable with it. I've also received a bond form for the development of the property, which Steve Garrison and I had some emails about earlier today, and we're very close to getting that in approvable format, and the development plan is coming along. Second item I wanted to report on is with regard to the boundary line adjustment agreement. That is ready for the next stage, but the question is how the process will go forward. Will that be something that the town incurs the expense for me to do, and then will that be billed back to Rush River, or will Rush River's own attorneys do that? So that is an open action item at this time. And then I sent you a legislative update for this year. As always, it's a little frustrating to deal with Richmond and the legislators down there who don't have much sympathy for our problems, but I am ready to answer any questions about that and anything else.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll take up the Rush River issue with the applicant. Get to an answer on that. Has the Commonwealth Attorney done all he needs to do for the Board of Supervisors?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Garrison is not with us this evening, but I believe there's a report.
Yes, it is.
Mr. Garrison is not here tonight.
Just yell at
There's a hard copy of his report available for the public in your packages in front of you. Brad, anything for
Yes. I've been trying to find someone who could give us a quote to do the engineering for the water line from the pump house to the tower, and people I've reached out to have all not responded. So this week, or this past week, I had a discussion with a firm called Kinley Horn. They are a planning design consultant. They work a lot with small communities in Virginia. So expressed what I needed done, and they said that's right in our laneway of what we do. So I had a meeting set up with them on the 19th. We're going to come in, we're going to go through the water system, we're going to go through the wastewater system, and talk about priorities and how we approach this. The other thing they're going to do is they're bringing somebody from, let me see here, the right title. I don't know the name, but it's somebody who can help us with grant writing. Because he said that there is a lot of money around, varies in amounts and stuff, but they have done a number of projects where they've been able to piggyback one on top of another, reach the federal monies and everything else. So they said, your situation is not unique, and we've been very successful. So,
That's great.
yeah, so that's what I'm going to do is have them come and meet with us, prepare something, and then plan to present it to council with the hopes that when they do, we can give them a go-ahead and let's get the engineering for this first piece underway. So that's what that is. Gail mentioned to you the 2 leaks we had. They won't be the last ones, to be sure. So we just have to be cognizant. At least they were ones that we could address pretty readily.
Is they weren't under asphalt this time?
No, Piedmont was under asphalt, but it was
Just a little.
not too bad, not
Yeah.
too bad. So, and that's all going on right now.
Okay. Barbara, we didn't have a planning commission meeting.
Can I ask a question?
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Have you talked to Steve Kreiser, because he said he knew where the line went?
I haven't talked to Steve, but Laura did some work on pulling some data and documents, the old easements and stuff. These guys, I'm sure, if we engage them, I'll let them talk to Steve
Okay.
and everything. Because, that's one of our fundamental problems. It was done by this guy, done by that guy. Nothing has been properly recorded. And I think in many cases, a lot was not done according to proper engineering code. So from here on out, it's got to be done right.
Any other questions? Architectural Review Board.
So for ARB, you should have the minutes in your packet. We did do elections in February. So I'm the new chair of the ARB West. Kurz remaining the vice chair, and then David McKnight will be our secretary. And then we just had a few updates around Rush River building exterior lighting. That was all approved as provided to us. And then our March meeting was canceled. So that's all we have.
Thank you, ma'am. These are our reports. I think we're ready to move to old business. Okay. All right, last month we spent a considerable amount of time talking about the Economic Development Authority. I think it was Dean or Patrick, I don't remember which, recommended that we put out a call for potential board members for the EDA, and I can say we were pleased to see we had a number of applicants, which was one, several of them are here tonight. We ended up with five total. I think if we proceed with the EDA, I would propose, as we get into the conversation, we take the 5 who received, and then myself and Ms. Gadine, and that would constitute our 7-member board. And I would do that in a very democratic process, which is to name the members in the order in which their applications were received. Somewhat in reverse order based on the paperwork here. But we can get into a conversation about the language, but the board proposed would be for a 1-year term, Tommy Bruce; for a 1-year term, Mary Ann Kuhn; for a 2-year term, Klaus Peters; for a 2-year term, Wendy Murdoch; for a 3-year term, John Fox Sullivan; for a 3-year term, Jean Godine; and for a 4-year term, myself. So that's the board. The document itself has not changed substantially, other than the fact that if you turn to the potential things we would ask the board to do, and I would point out that we are not limiting what the authority may do, we're just giving them some place to start as they come into session. So there are only 2 items under that paragraph 3 now. A, the establishment of a minimum tax rebate for restaurants, and B, making grants for to support the opening of a retail establishment in the town. At this point, I would open it to discussion.
We'll have a motion first.
Actually, I want to discuss a little bit. The Economic Development Authority may take the following, so we're not saying they have to do.
Correct.
annually.
Yes.
Okay.
So we would like them to do, and I understand from Mr. Krim, we can't absolutely tell them what to do. So it's more we would like them to take action on these things, and then the board would act as they saw fit. The authority.
I've got one thought. Mr. Krim, you can jump in and let me know if I'm crazy or not. I'd like to see the ordinance just stop before number 3. Make that the ordinance, and then have a separate, what do you call it, a resolution of guidelines that we could give them to talk about at their organizational meeting. That something like that would be a little easier to be revised, tweaked, whatever, as we need to do any updates, or if they come back to us and say, I'd rather do this or that, it'd be a little easier than going through and changing the entire ordinance.
Certainly that's an option. That is one option, that you could break this into 2 separate documents, one ordinance, appointment, the other a resolution, that basically saying that subject to the appropriation of funds by the town, we would like you to do X, Y, and Z. And as you point out, that resolution is for subject to whatever appropriations would be taken, so it is not a permanent kind of action. It's more of the nature of this is what we're thinking right now. You're right, it would make it easier to change. But I want to make sure that you understand there's no requirement for the council to come back and amend this ordinance to grant additional powers, because the EDA already has those powers. And any action that the town council wants the EDA to take with public funds, with town funds, the town would have to then appropriate those funds and could indicate what the strings are when it appropriates those funds.
Okay, thank you, sir. I could go with either, as Mr. Quinn suggested. I would want to rephrase A, establish a meals and lodging tax rebate, and make that all part of, I'm coming at this because we at the town council in our budget allot a certain amount of money for the EDA. We've put it in the draft budget, $10,000. So in order, I think it would be easier if we make everything grants, that yes, a new restaurant could come and request a grant up to what their tax would have been, what we could figure out something like that. But I'm trying to get away from the phrase tax rebate, because the taxes are paid by individuals coming to the town. The purveyors get to keep 3% of that as an administrator, so it gets a little technical. So, Mr. Krimwood, any thoughts on it?
I think it would be what you're describing is a business incentive that would be subject to performance criteria that the EDA would put into an agreement that the new restaurant would sign.
Which would be true in either case.
It would be true in either case, but you do raise a good point that the meals and lodging taxes are not paid by the business, they are paid by the patron.
Right. And the business gets to keep 3% of that. We'll have them keep 3% as an administrative cost. So that gets so technical, I just think it should all be rolled into one. That's my thoughts.
Well, can I interject? I tend to agree more. The ordinance is to establish the EDA and leave it at that. Then we could pass a resolution with a suggestion or whatever. But I see the EDA as setting up basically their own rules, their own criteria to, scale potential people so that this way everybody's treated equally in the town. Doesn't matter whether you're a hospitality business or whether you're a merchant, everybody's treated equally. So my feeling is this ordinance should only be for the establishment and then the opening names and their terms. And that should be as far as it goes. Then let's do a resolution, which you said, Mr. Quinn, we could do separately with this reworded in a different way. Again, going back to the concept of we don't, distinguish between anybody conducting business in the town of Washington. Everybody is on an equal footing. And again, that would be, the EDA would set up that protocol and scoring system or whatever they want to do it.
I guess I have two things that I would bring up. One, as I understand, 3 is just a suggestion, and the EDA can take the suggestion and go ahead and throw it out the window and come up with something better. And I don't know if I want to change all of the purpose of this. There's been a lot of thought into putting it together in this particular way. So I would recommend just leaving it as it is, because basically what you're doing is giving guidelines. They can take the minutes from this meeting and your good thoughts and Brad's good thoughts and decide to remove A and do something else instead. But rather than have to go through this administrative process of getting an ordinance and then doing a resolution, I would just do this. The second thing I want to suggest is that perhaps, and here I am adding a burden to the ordinance, but to have some kind of annual report or a guideline as to what are their, not a guideline, an annual report as to what their guidelines are they're using. So that the town council can feel some sense of responsibility, even though there is a hands-off relationship, we still will have an idea, and it will be to the public an understanding of what the EDA is using as their guidelines for themselves.
Mr. Krim, we can ask him to produce an annual report to us again.
Yeah, all the records of the EDA are public records, but they can also typically do an annual report, and often the chair will come and make a presentation to the governing body. So that's perfectly acceptable.
So I would add that as a point, maybe 4, and move the point 4 down to 5.
I had a question. Go ahead.
Sorry. Whoever wants to.
And this is for Mr. Krim again. We're saying that the EDA may take the following actions. What if they come up with something completely different?
So,
and it's not listed here.
Right. The EDA has all the authority that is granted by statute. So there's no ability for the town council to restrict the actions of the EDA other than through the power of the purse when you appropriate funds.
So why do we list them at all?
I
Good
think
point. Let's just remove.
I would say I think there's an optics component to this too, though, because this is sort of what inspired the creation of the development authority. I don't think we're binding their hands in any way and saying they have to, adhere to this, but this was kind of the original initiative.
It shows the intent
It shows the intent.
of the town.
And the importance of it too, I think, council, I think we can agree this is why we're going through these motions.
Right.
So we don't want to get lost, I think, in conversation as the EDA goes along, and we want to show this as a priority.
I would still request that we do something aside from the raising of tax rebate, just because of what it is.
Well, Patrick had some things, please.
I just wondered if the incentive or rebate is offered at the inception of a business's opening, what happens if it's accepted and then the business closes 3 weeks later?
Well, that was the reason for making it a rebate, right? So if they stop selling anything, then we stop providing the rebate. If you made it a grant, that's a little harder, I would argue, that's a little harder to control. And then if the business fails, we can turn off the tap.
I see.
Mr. Mayor, also, I've seen it happen where there is an upfront payment, as you're describing, and then if they don't meet their criteria for staying open for a certain length of time, we claw back that money. And I've successfully done that.
And it's also the reason on the one grant that I put in this draft is oriented toward an investment in the actual property itself, which isn't going to go anywhere. So the infrastructure for retail establishment, rather than for buying of inventory or something like that. We could head out of town in the middle of the night.
Well, to that end, you say that's to be used for someone, a merchant, but not for someone who's going to be building a restaurant.
And the EDA could say that we want to do grants to further encourage the build of a restaurant. I'm not saying that's not possible. I'm just,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Which again, Gene, I support you. I think there's no need for it. Take it out. If you're talking about the intent, well, the intent is right there. We're right at the town council, and we've stated it. So I'm still of the opinion, take out item 3. You've got 4 and 5, that makes enough of the document.
Or we could remove A and just make grants not to exceed to support the opening of new retail or food businesses.
I would disagree with that. I mean, if we're going to signal word the intent of this council, and I went back to the point that Drew raised, I mean, the reason we're creating an EDA is to encourage restaurants and retail in the town. So why wouldn't we want to put that in writing and in the ordinance? It doesn't make any difference in the long run, but it's signaling it all in one document. We're not going through the kabuki dance of passing a separate motion. I mean, if we agree that these are things we want to do, let's just do it in one document. It doesn't need to be revised. Pardon me.
And I just want to remind everybody, this is an important conversation, so use your outside voices.
Thank you.
Right.
Also drink plenty of water.
Yeah, right.
It is signaling that these are the things that the council takes seriously. It's the things that we heard about at the Business Roundtable and we've tried to say that we're encouraging retail and meals and lodging. So let's put it in writing that we encourage these 2 activities.
Or we could say establish, and I'm just trying to get away from any conflict that might arise on the tax rebate, so I'm just doing phrasing here. So establish a grant equivalent to a meals and lodging tax rebate to be paid out
Quarterly or whatever. I mean, it doesn't.
quarterly. So I'm just trying to get away from that phrasing.
Just trying to be simple.
Yeah, exactly. So
They can say how we're going to do it.
right. So say on a quarterly basis.
May I suggest that we use, instead of, it sounds like you're struggling hard with the 2 words tax rebate.
Very much so.
Might I suggest that we use relief instead of tax rebate? The general idea is that we're trying to provide
Tax relief.
either tax relief or just take out, say, meals and lodging relief, I don't know, either one or the other.
I would not make it tax relief because we're not relieving a business of paying taxes.
My original suggestion was
Yeah.
to take out tax rebate and just replace it with relief.
Mhm.
The trouble with relief, it sounds like they don't even have to collect it.
Yeah.
They do have to collect it.
Right.
Right, just establish a meals and lodging grant equal to,
I'm afraid we're debating form over function here. It will
Yeah.
equate to the very same thing, so I'm not sure
Well, I'm just-
why we need this language. I mean,
to get
it
away
is
from.
what it is. It's going to be
It
a
can be equal
rebate.
to,
Yeah.
but it's really not going to be, it's
How
not,
how about this? A tax rebate equal to the meals and lodging taxes collected by the restaurant.
a grant equal to, yeah.
It can't be a tax rebate, because now, because when you've said that, then conceptually, it could exceed the 5,000, which you're saying is in section B.
So here's the other part about doing it as a tax rebate and vice versa grant. We do not need to appropriate funds for a tax rebate.
But it is money that does not come into the town.
That's
Coffers.
correct, but it's money that we are not already collecting.
Right. And in lieu of what I just told you in the infrastructure report, we have a lot of expenses coming in. We need every penny.
And I need more businesses to open in town to support that infrastructure, right? That's the whole idea.
I know, it's a chicken and egg type of thing. But
Yeah.
again,
I gotta have the
I don't
businesses
like-
collect the taxes to pay for the water system.
Well, once again, I would say it's up to the EDA.
Right.
it is an ultimately the EDA.
All right.
But again, goes back to
Here,
why
the-
bother with this?
The principle of the thing is we want to create an EDA. So
Right.
let's create an EDA and we will deal with these other issues later. I will move for a supplemental a motion to ask them to take action on these two particular things because I agree it is absolutely essential that we signal this council's support for the business community.
Absolutely. That can be
Do I have a motion?
separate to the
So-
EDA.
So you're, I'm,
Let's split it. Let's just split it.
okay, so I will make a motion that we pass the ordinance as stated with two changes. One, the removal of section 3 as it is now, and in its place put the EDA having a requirement of producing an annual report and a presentation to the town council.
Mhm.
That would be my
Mhm.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Mayor,
Oh, yes, sir.
I just want to make sure that everybody's also understanding that this would make the appointments in the order that you had outlined earlier.
Right.
There wasn't any discussion about that, just wanted to not lose track of that.
That's fair. Thank you.
Should I add that to the motion?
No, I think the motion is understood now.
Mhm.
But can I ask those who were, I mean, I don't even know if this is appropriate, but the people who are present today, who we've just told would be for one of these terms, do they get any say about whether they want to do it for 2 or 3 or 1 year?
Well, they signed up for it, and there is a motion pending on the floor, so that the debate should be entirely between the council and.
So if we tell someone that they've signed up for a term of 2 years and they say, I only want to do 1, they can still do that.
Sure.
That's okay. Or shift it appropriately. Yeah. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll do a roll call vote. Please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Aye.
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 The motion is adopted, and we now have an economic development authority. Thank you. I will now make the second motion before we move on to the budget.
Barbara?
Yes.
Point of clarity, because Wendy is going to serve on it, should I abstain?
Yeah.
Okay, please make note of that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
would you entertain an observation on the subject, or should I make some correspondence?
It's up to you.
Former Mayor, Mr. Sullivan.
I
recognized for comment.
purposely waited.
Yeah.
Purposely waited to do that. I'd just like to make the observation that both in the last meeting and this meeting, there are a lot of issues. I think it's good. I think there's a lot of issues here. And at the end of the day, it seems to me it's the town council that really should have the responsibility for tend to have the responsibility for being clear as to what we want to accomplish, as opposed to letting the EDA kind of do whatever it wants, and nobody said that. There's sort of to what extent is the EDA going to create rules and implement them under very general guidelines extremely general guidelines. And to what extent is the town council going to want to make clear what it wants? And obviously there's overlap because there's 2 members on this meeting. But I just think, I'm not sure there's a lot of clarity as to how a lot of this stuff might be implemented. And then a second question, which is very particular, but does this group have access to the town lawyer and other administrative staff to do whatever it is that they might need?
Yes. And I think, John, your point, it's part of the reason I had those last 2 points in there and why I'm about to make another motion to give them some general direction, because I do think it's important, one, from signaling, but 2, for us to be very clear about.
This group shouldn't have too much authority.
Right, well, is that we want to give them a sense of what direction we would like them to go, rather than just saying, go forth and do wonderful things. To that end, I'll make a second motion, which would be to the Town of Washington the Town Council request that the Town of Washington Economic Development Authority take the following actions and subject to the appropriation of funds by the town. A, to establish a meals and lodging tax rebate for a period of not to exceed 24 months in each instance to encourage the opening of new restaurants within the town. B, make grants not to exceed $5,000 in each instance to support the opening of new retail businesses supporting the tourist trade within the town. These funds may only be used to pay for the rent or renovation of the property to be occupied by the business.
I'll second that motion.
Any questions?
I just want to check that you did read that the town council directed, well, not directed, that the EDA may take the following actions.
Yes, I said may take.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Can I get a roll call vote?
Abstain.
Aye.
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 Abstain.
Aye.
You can vote.
Motion is adopted. All right, on to the budget.
Budget. The big noise.
You did run for treasurer.
Only because you threw me down to the ground and stepped on my arm.
I didn't know that.
No, Barbara did. You beat me up in the like, yes, I ran.
Okay.
All right.
So I will, have a motion in a second for that. So at this time, I will open the public hearing for the town's FY '23 and '24 budget. Anyone would like any comments or questions from the public?
On the budget.
This is for the budget.
Oh, budget.
Yeah.
Sorry, fell asleep.
John.
Did I speak too much?
All right.
A question.
Shoot.
The town has been very fortunate in the last 2-3 years, whatever, in getting dramatically increased revenue from meals and lodging to the end of it. And then money from the feds due to COVID. And you have, in my view, wisely put most of it or all of it, much of it, into infrastructure improvements, water and sewer. And I'd be curious just about how much money has gone into rebuilding, redoing the infrastructure in this town. I imagine it's a significant number, which I think is good news. And the town's been fortunate to be able to deal with problems they couldn't deal with before. But I'm curious sort of what the magnitude of that number might be. And whether it's 2 years, 3 years, whatever.
Over the last 4 years, so we received $66,000 in COVID relief money. I'm sorry.
135.
135, I always do the definitely, yeah. $135,000 in COVID money, and then the town itself invested another just north of $700,000 over the last 4 years. And then,
700.
Yes.
so it's about just about $800,000 over the last 4 years. I'm trying to get it right in ship and get us on a steady state going forward. So the sewer system's in relatively good shape. So we all work to do on the water side.
Yeah, the sewer system is not bad. There are things we want to do to upgrade,
Yeah.
which will reduce energy use, a handful of things like that. The critical one, and what I've said for 2023, focuses on the water system, because it's not, operationally, it's not working the way it should be, and we do have old lines.
It's effective, we can absolutely keep up the capacity, it's just not the way it was quite designed how to do it.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
just be clear.
Right. So,
Yeah, so we have been very lucky.
yeah.
We have, and I don't raise it to be critical, I think
No, no.
it's terrific news.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think the town's been able to do that as something that actually the town should take more credit for, frankly.
Well, and
It's a
I'm
major infrastructure improvement for the last decade, and money hasn't been spent for that.
right.
Roughly speaking.
Well, and I would like to compliment Atrium Construction. They are our general contractor for most things, and they do an outstanding job. They will rearrange schedules to come in if we absolutely need them. They've been prompt, their work is excellent. So we're fortunate to have someone like that that really understands infrastructure, water systems, sewer systems, and nothing phases them.
And we should be very thrilled that we have the town administrator who has her thumb on every penny that goes out.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
And as long as we're saying thanks, we should say thanks to the task force,
Yes.
which has taken this on as a project and done a great job, it seems to me, keeping track of everything going on.
It's been a fun 4 years, Brad.
And
And we got more to go.
it's about to get in.
To that point, I would go ahead and I guess just note it since we're talking about it, that in July, just before the 4th of July break, we'll be doing an evaluation of all the valves in town so we can make sure that we're able to isolate different parts of town when we do have a leak to avoid shutting off water access to the whole town. Hopefully that'll go well, but I will unfortunately have to report that may lead to another boil water advisory for 48 hours. But we're going to try to limit that as much as possible.
Can I ask a question about that? Out of curiosity, I'm Wendy Murdoch, by the way. Out of curiosity, what did it cost us for the water main break on Piedmont Avenue in terms of gallons of water and cost for repair, out of curiosity?
It's an $8,000 repair bill, and we were losing
6,000 a day.
No, it was less than that. It was 60,000 gallons of water a day.
A day. No. Okay.
Yeah, 60,000 a day, and it took 5 days to find,
Yeah.
6
And
days.
then how many days to fix?
302.
It was 2 days to get it fixed,
Yeah.
but it was leading up to it,
Yeah.
yeah. The fortunate part is,
Finding a leak that's next to a creek is
About 300
turns out
gallons.
tricky. Yeah.
the fortunate part about it is with the meter system that we have in place now, Barbara could eliminate that the leak was between a meter and a property, because she wasn't getting any alarm bells on that. So we knew, okay, that part was fine, we didn't have to go search properties. What we did have to go do is walk the town for all the lines to see if we could find the leak. And even on Piedmont, it wasn't evident, but fortunately, Craig, the Country Water, said, I'm going to do a chlorine test on the little creek that runs under the road. And that's something that only with years of experience, you just go, let me try that. And lo and behold, he found chlorine in that water, and then he could zero in and we identified where the leak was. But, it's one of those things, and big municipalities struggle with the same things, chasing water leaks. But again, our system alerts us pretty quickly. And
That's been a huge savings on the
Yeah.
residential side. And
Yeah, it really has.
So then we can usually isolate it to one of the mains or one of the feeder lines, which is usually helpful.
Yeah.
Anything in the budget?
Any other questions? All right. In that case, I will close the public hearing on the FY 23-24 budget. Any other comments or questions from the council?
No.
All right, then we'll move on to TAP grants. I think you're on.
Thank you. So I have been doing some research about getting a transportation alternative grant from the Virginia Department of Transportation. What I'm asking of it, I will the timeline is that they have a pre-application process that occurs between May 15th and August 15th. And then a final application is due, I believe, in the fall. I've been working with Patrick Monty, the Executive Director of the Rappahannock Regional Commission, to begin putting everything together. I've attended several seminars on this that technically make me an expert, although I question that. As you know, we received a grant last year and took a huge step, which was to get a consultant's expert analysis of the transportation system that we have in the town of Washington, and that will be of great benefit with this proposal for a grant. What I come to the town council for tonight is to try to get a consensus tonight as to what should be requested in this grant. I want to put forth 4 things that I think should be considered as part of it. I should back up and say that the way the Transportation Alternative Program grants work, or TAP grants work, is that the VDOT, through their own local funds and also through funds they receive, I think, federally, will pay 80% of the cost. The other 20% has to be paid locally. It can come from any source, be it municipal funds or it can come from private funds. There are some opportunities. As we have found with the post office, we've had people in the community who were very generous. So I think that may be a source of funding. We may find other grants, foundation grants or others that might support getting that 20%. So before we go hog wild, I want us to be sensitive to that point, that the town will have a responsibility for 20% of the ultimate costs. But I would propose 4 that I think are important and 2 that I would put under a question mark. But I would like to ask as an end goal for tonight to get a consensus from the town council. So bear with me, and please feel free after I present these suggestions to give your comments and add other thoughts that you might have. The first is to extend a sidewalk down Warren Avenue from Gay Street to the post office and Rush River. Second is to...
Can we just go a little slowly? Because I
Sure.
don't have this in front of me, right?
No.
So I'm trying to take notes.
No, that's fine. So Warren Avenue from... So all these are sidewalks.
Right, yeah, but Warren Avenue to...
From Gay Street to the post office in Rush River, basically to that intersection of Leggett Lane. I guess I should be like a VDOT and go from cross streets to cross street. So Gay Street to Leggett Lane. The second would be to do a Main Street. The consultant recommended doing a Main Street, a sidewalk on the west side of Main Street, and the mayor has had feedback from businesses of extending or creating a sidewalk from Middle Street to Porter. I will add that many of you know there is a very tricky area I don't know whether it's on VDOT property or whether it's a private residence, but at the corner of Piedmont and Main, that I hope would be rectified if we had this sidewalk. The third...
There's a step down there next to
the step down next to the White Moose Inn.
Okay.
The third would be to address the eastern extension of Porter Street between Gay Street and where Porter Street becomes Mount Salem shows where I am. Mount Salem Avenue.
essentially along the side of the courthouse.
along the side of the courthouse. The fourth would be to have an extension from Mount Salem Avenue from the edge of the old schoolhouse to the entrance or the opening in the stone fence. So that would be accessible to people who live in the
I didn't
schoolhouse.
catch it. It's from the,
So right now, the sidewalk ends right at the property line for the old school. As I understand it, the sidewalk used to go all the way down, either to that opening in the stone wall or all the way down to the driveway, because it was, I assume, built for the school. And that complex has a number of people who live there who are a bit older, and it worries me that they're walking along the street there. Second, you have a couple of businesses that people go down the end of Mount Salem and then walk back. I'd like to make it a little bit safer for them. You have people who are at an end down at the end of that street, and they're walking up to the Inn at Little Washington for dinner. I'd like them to be able to have more of a sidewalk. So those are the four that I see as very important. There are three others that are kind of on a wish list. The first is, and this is a tricky one, about the Gay Street between Jet and Porter, the brick sidewalk, essentially. Do we want to address that? The second is an extension of Main Street farther south to the edge of the town line, or at least to incorporate the other two ends that are farther down South Main Street, namely the Foster Harris house and the Middleton Inn. And then the final is a treatment for the square in front of the Inn at Little Washington to make it more pedestrian safe by having crosswalks or
adding like a brick crosswalk.
and maybe they have these things called traffic quieting or calming devices that they use. And so those are the 7 things that come up to my mind. And again, I open it to council for their remarks, and if they have suggestions of others or anything else.
do you have any idea
I'm sorry.
how much each would cost? Because you say we're going to be coughing up 20
I was about to make a similar comment, which is, I believe, before you answer that question, even if we submitted a maximalist request for a grant, we could say, well, we're actually only going to do 2 out of the 7 or 3, because that's all we could afford to do, but we on the record is like that, correct? But I think we wouldn't know the cost until we got a little further down the road.
We're not going to be able to give you the precise costs.
I don't expect questions. If you have any sort of ballpark figure.
The costs are going to be, to do a sidewalk, ends up being fairly substantial. So I would say for Warren Avenue, you're probably talking about $100,000.
I'm sorry, how much?
$80,000 to $100,000. That would be
$20,000 in funds that we would be responsible for.
And you know that Fred is already out canvassing for private funds. Sorry, I'm the treasurer.
So my guess is that between the first 4, probably you're talking about between $150,000 and $200,000. And then the other 3, those are going to be much more problematic to figure out. You've got space. The reason why the extension of Main Street would be on the west side, that was the consultant's recommendation, even though there's a sidewalk for a portion on the east side between Middle Street and Jet Street. All you're utility lines and everything are on the east side. And the consultants recommend that sidewalk should be on the side free of poles. You have, on the west side, you have clearance going down to Porter Street. You run into a problem on the east side with an embankment coming all the way down to the street. And you have a private residence. You also have a problem if you went beyond Porter Street with that Main Street extension farther south, in that it would have an impact at least on one residence, perhaps two, farther south, to put in the sidewalk there.
Brad, do you have a question?
Correct me if I'm wrong, none of this addresses the brick sidewalk in front of
That was
the county buildings.
One of the,
Yeah.
that was one of the add-ons I did at the end.
Oh, okay.
The Gay Street.
Oh, okay. All right. Because that, to me, is, I would almost put that as a high priority because it is in such bad shape.
Well, my sense is that we can go to VDOT and get them to do that now as a repair. We just need to address what they're going to do is they're just going to put in a cement drive, a cement sidewalk.
Yeah.
And I think that there is, in my discussions with people in VDOT, that's what they're going to do. They're not going to do the bricks.
I would suggest that when the county finally settles on its plan for the courthouse campus, that we try to work out a joint agreement to redo that at the same time.
Yeah, well.
At the moment, it's no man's land.
Right.
It's not ours,
you
it's not
mentioned,
theirs. Yeah.
You know, VDOT's just going to want to put concrete down.
Right.
If it was done in such a way that it created essentially a tray, that you could then go back with a brick veneer, that way, okay, let them put that in, then we can come back with
And we've
brick.
talked to,
It would look nice.
Barbara would be nice enough to put us in, or work out a contact with Old Town Alexandria and the folks up in Middleburg who had brick sidewalks and talked about ways to just actually redo it as a brick sidewalk. Whatever it takes to make it level, but so that we don't lose the appearance of a brick sidewalk. So I think that's the part where I'd like
And I've
for us
actually
to-
been involved in one of those.
I'd like for us to, I think that's one of those things we can work with the county and try to come to a good conclusion to clean them as they clean.
And in fact, the Porter Street extension,
Yeah,
since already has a sidewalk,
Yeah.
that could be part of that one. So we could take that out of the first floor.
Yeah, because, I walk that sidewalk every day, and as you get further down,
It's extremely dangerous.
you even get a tree in there, which I would imagine have to come out in order to put the sidewalk in correctly.
So one of the things that I heard from the building committee, the county's building committee at one point, perhaps a year ago, is that they were thinking of closing off the door on the back side of the old jail. And so those stairs would no longer be needed, which would solve a lot of the problems.
Right, that's what I said on Gay Street,
Oh, the trees.
There's one, I think there's one. or
There's two.
There's
There's two trees that they would have to
Yeah,
probably
But
remove.
Joe knows, because you told me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say,
There's-
there are also
there's
options where,
ways
if our option is take down a huge tree or put in some rubber aggregate in that particular area, like they do in the cities, I think I will take the rubber over taking down a tree in that particular area
yeah.
as just a gap in the sidewalk. I think those are things we can address.
Let's go back to your
Apologize,
priorities.
yeah. I'm sorry,
I
Patrick,
think,
did
oh,
you?
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to point out while we're on the subject that there's a very dangerous, hazardous hole on Main Street.
Yeah.
Near the small real estate log cabin. And a visitor fell in it the other day and came looking for us, hoping that we owned it. She was extremely disappointed that we did not. So I went down to look at it and was pretty shocked. If you were walking it at night and your foot went down in it, you'd probably break an ankle. So we put a white cone over top of it, but it's something that shouldn't wait to be addressed.
Barbara can speak to that.
Yeah.
I was in touch with VDOT and it's on their schedule to repair it next week.
Wonderful. Good.
Because now a second hole is open.
Yeah.
It's still,
It's just collapsing, the culvert is collapsing.
it needs, ideally, will they replace the entire culvert, the pipe?
I'm sure
I don't
that,
know.
I would think, you don't repair those, so they just bring in a piece and they'll dig all that out, I'm sure, just probably what it is.
Although I fell through the culvert on the other side of Ballard's, and they came in and just filled stuff.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
they didn't replace that culvert.
Yeah, that is so rusted out, because I did go and look at that after Barbara told me about it, and it is so corroded. You fix one part, there's gonna be another hole.
Anyway, so this is perhaps another reason why to look at building a whole new sidewalk on the west side.
Yeah.
Because there are all sorts of problems with the one on the east side.
I would, I love your suggestions. I would take, because I'm there, and I walk it all the time, but I would take the Mount Salem extension down as far as we could, at least to the driveway there of the school, because people do walk up and down there a lot. And if they're coming from Fairleigh Farm to go to the inn or patios for dinner, they literally just have to do like a little jog. It's not, it would get them a little closer to a sidewalk. So that's the one thing that I would say.
That's the Mount Salem contingent.
Nothing like voting your, where you stand is where you sit or where you sleep.
That's it.
I have a question about, you're going to have a walking trail to the post office?
That is in process right now.
Then maybe the sidewalk is of less importance than some of these other things.
It could be, but the trail will not be an ADA compliant trail. And it will, I mean, so the other option is if we ever want to get a sidewalk down to the post office, if we put it on the VDOT regular schedule, and they do a 6-year schedule, so they're putting things on now to be done 6 years from now. At that point, the ratio, I believe, is 60-40. Barbara, do you know?
Ratio, I'm sorry,
The ratio for sidewalks
For VDOT.
for VDOT, is it 60-40?
I do not know.
I think it's 60-40 or 50-50, but it becomes significantly larger amount.
I might suggest, for the simple that we authorize Fred to go ahead and complete the grant application and submit it, perhaps bumping the projects around the post office down, or around the courthouse down the list, or off.
Okay.
And then go ahead and take sort of the maximalist approach, see what comes back, and as
I think we have enough time. I can
select from there.
I can do that. It's good to get this guidance from the council, and I can come back and try to bring you some more precise figures at our June meeting.
Great.
And then we can come up with a final consensus then. But this has been helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for doing all the work.
I'm not sure if we need one, if he's gonna come back in June, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you though. Yeah, all right. Well, that's the TAP grant, so now I will open the public forum. Anyone wishing to speak, please stand up and identify yourself. Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy Murdoch, and I am speaking for myself and for Joan Platt, because Joan Platt can't be here. She had sent an email to the mayor and has not had a response. The last fireworks had ashes flying over the bamboo trees into her yard. She has a 1900s house, it's wood. There were red pieces of ash flying over her house. We both feel that the fireworks are inappropriate. You only did a study for 3 years, from 2020, you said, to 23. I wish you would do one for the past 20 years, because you'll see a significant change in the amount of fireworks in the past 3 years, and we had 3 scheduled fireworks for the month of April. So with no control from the council, I have no way to know that this is not going to be a regular occurrence of 3 times a month versus what it's been now. I still do think it's a hazard. I think it's a hazard to people's property. I think it's a hazard to people's animals. And I ask that you revisit this and do something about the fireworks. There are silent fireworks and there are drones. Why do we have to have fireworks that disturb the local wildlife our animals and our people every time we need to have a firework in this town. I do not think it's appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comments? In case I will close the public forum. At this time, the council will go into closed session briefly to talk about personnel actions. So I thank you all for coming out tonight.
You are